I was seated at the defense table in the county courthouse with my attorney by my side as the jury was about to enter. My lawyer advised me of the possibility of facing multiple years of incarceration if found guilty of the charges. I did it because I felt I had no other option. While I may have acted in a manner that could be perceived as excessive, I am unsure if there was a viable alternative at the time. I believe I need to start from the beginning to make things clear. Do you know why I'm here today? My wife, Rose, and I got married when we were older. She was 32, and I was 34. Rose was always strikingly she was beautiful, and I was immediately enamored from the moment we met. After several challenging months, we began dating. I took the relationship seriously, and we were married a year later. We had both been through our share of relationships, and I believed that our age and experiences would be advantageous. Our relationship was positive for the first 3 years. Rose did not work and was content staying at home. We discussed having children, and since she enjoyed not working, I did not pressure her. We were financially stable, and I was eager to begin a family. However, she preferred that I did not. If she were to embark on a career, she would have to leave her current role to care for our children. Rose was naturally cheerful and sociable, which often led other men to misinterpret her friendliness as flirtation. This resulted in altercations on occasion. I considered the possibility that Rose acted this way to provoke me, but I never responded in kind. I disliked conflict and always sought to avoid it, adhering to the principle of turning the other cheek. This avoidance of confrontation persisted until 2 months ago. I have always avoided fights and challenges not because I am weak, as some I was following my father's advice from my youth, which resulted in consistently strong academic performance. However, when we relocated to my current city, which was far from where I grew up, I had to say goodbye to my teachers, friends, and everything I loved about my old town. I was in 8th grade, and the new school felt large and intimidating. I kept quiet about it to spare my dad any guilt as he moved us for financial reasons. My mom had passed away 2 years prior, and my dad was still grieving. Rose, the school seemed to be under the control of the individual in question, Tommy Bullinger, exhibited an immediate aversion to me on my inaugural day. As I was preparing to catch the bus, a tall figure obstructed my path. Initially, I was unable to discern the individual's identity. However, after being physically forced to the ground, I looked up to see someone who appeared to be a giant to me at that time. At the time, I was merely 5 feet 3 inches, and I have since grown to 5 feet 7 inches. This towering figure, accompanied by slightly shorter companions, demanded that I rise, relinquish my backpack, and surrender any I had been carrying cash, which I was forced to relinquish. I was so terrified that I involuntarily urinated, which, in retrospect, may have prevented further mistreatment. Tommy demanded my name. I replied, clearly frightened. He responded with disdain, Pete Huckabee. I was now known as PC Pete. Tommy then informed the group that I had urinated. Like a child, Tommy proclaimed to the onlookers. Glancing around, I observed that everyone was laughing at me. Overwhelmed with fear, I ran all the way home, bypassing the bus ride. Tommy persisted in harassing me. He was a junior, so I was forced to endure his taunts until he finally graduated a year later. Those first 2 years were extremely challenging for me. No girl would go out with me because of the PCP nickname. No matter what I did, that label followed me. The experience at school was consistently challenging, and I was persistently targeted. Despite my belief that I was a decent individual, the treatment I received at school led me to question this perception. I eagerly anticipated Tommy's graduation, hoping for an end to his relentless harassment. However, Tommy did not demonstrate any kindness towards his victims, including me. It appeared that he derived pleasure from instilling fear and misery in others. Following Tommy's departure from school, my senior year became somewhat more tolerable, with only a few instances of harassment. Despite my efforts, I was still referred to as PC Pete. I was able to graduate at the top of my class and deliver the valedictorian speech. I proceeded to attend a reputable college and pursued a degree in engineering. When I broached the subject with my father, he immediately offered to intervene at school. However, I was aware that such an action might exacerbate the situation. I requested a brief period of time to allow for a potential reduction in the intensity of the offense. My father consented, and I provided an erroneous reassurance that the situation had improved when he inquired a few days later. The experience of attending school was undoubtedly challenging. However, Rose was able to adapt to the new environment after the initial 2-month period. Upon my return home that day, I was overcome with such distress that I feared I might lose control. My younger brother, the only sibling I have had, took something from me, though I am unsure what it was. All I knew was that he became my unintended target. Our argument caught the attention of my father, who was in the next room. The cumulative effect of these circumstances was a sudden eruption of rage. I shoved my brother against the wall and raised my fist as if to strike him. He managed to evade the attack at the last moment, and my fist made contact with the wall instead. Our house was constructed with plaster walls and wooden slats, which resulted in a 3-point impact. A 3-foot hole and even 2 slats were broken right where my brother's head had been. Upon seeing the damage, my father came into the room and was horrified. My brother was in tears and screaming that I should have gone to my room immediately. As a result, I was grounded for 2 months. Those 2 months felt like an eternity. My father made it clear how dangerous losing my temper could be. The potential for fatal harm was a stark realization that has influenced my behavior to this day, prompting me to prioritize de-escalation over conflict. With some context about my background, I will share what transpired 3 months ago. I typically call home before lunch since Rose prepares it for me, but I forgot to do so that day. My workplace is only a 20-minute drive from home, making it feasible to return for lunch within my hour break. The residence is only a 20-minute drive from the workplace, which makes it feasible to return for lunch within an hour's break. Upon arrival, I discovered Rose cleaning the living room carpet, which had been marred by size 13 muddy footprints leading from the front to the back bedroom. I inquired about the source of the mess on our new carpet. Rose explained that Leo, the building manager, had a new employee inspect the smoke detectors. The detectors had walked in with muddy shoes and failed to clean them. Her explanation seemed rehearsed. I will speak with Leo about this at the earliest convenience. We have white carpets, and this should have been obvious. I retorted, do not concern yourself with this, Peter. I will speak with him. She assured me that she would handle it after finishing her lunch. I did not give it another thought later. That week, I observed Leo exiting another apartment building and summoned him for a discussion. I approached Leo and initiated a conversation. Good day, Leo. How are you? It has been some time since we last spoke. We discussed sports and the weather until I recalled the incident I wished to address with you. The other day, your colleague visited my apartment to inspect the smoke detectors and left behind mud. I had mentioned that the individual in question was not my new guy. Leo then corrected me, displaying a slight irritation. He then proceeded to inform me that the individual in question is indeed Tom, with a last name that I could not recall. I had mentioned my need for assistance, and Tom was supposed to be there to help me. Leo then proceeded to elucidate the manner in which Tom had initially presented himself, acting in a manner that suggested a sense of authority and responsibility. He proceeded to delineate our schedules and the manner in which tasks were to be conducted. I was compelled to remind him of the specific duties that had been assigned to him, a reminder that he did not receive favorably. His demeanor was such that it seemed as though he was capable of exhibiting a sudden and intense emotional response. I was on the verge of terminating his employment, but he still appeared to retain the capacity for such an action. I was inclined to dismiss him immediately, yet he retained a certain intensity in his gaze. I was persuaded that if I had terminated his employment, he might have resorted to violence or committed an act of even greater severity. I intend to contact the relevant corporate entity to request his dismissal. He was hired based on his purported proficiency with tools, yet in my assessment, he exhibited indications of psychological distress. From the outset, Leo and I discussed the matter. I also informed Pete about the smoke detectors. 3 weeks ago, I checked the detectors myself and informed your wife that the two at the back needed new batteries. I then replaced them. Leo maintained that there was no reason for Tom to be checking the smoke alarms, as that is not part of his duties. His demeanor was notably lacking in affection, leaving me with reservations after our discussion. However, I was soon diverted and forgot about it until another incident captured my attention a few weeks later. While searching for another pair of sneakers in my closet and recalling that I had left them under the bed, I discovered a size 1 shoe, which was muddy. The shoe prints under my wife's side of the bed were identical to those I had previously observed her cleaning. It was evident that these prints could only have been made by someone who removed their shoes and placed them there intentionally. My wife typically relocates my shoes as a routine practice, yet it appeared that she had overlooked these particular tracks. On the same day, while retrieving socks from my drawer, I observed the presence of several that did not belong to me. They were size 13, considerably larger than my usual preference, and in a color I would never select. While attempting to put them on, I experienced a moment of absurdity. However, this feeling quickly dissipated as I contemplated the implications of their discovery. How could another individual's socks have found their way into my drawer? The more as I considered the situation further, I became increasingly concerned. Then, one day, my neighbor, Mrs. Adams, who lives right across the hall, inquired, "Have they finished fixing your place yet?" I was confused by the question, so I replied, "Sally, I'm not sure what you mean. I wasn't aware that anything needed repair." She then hinted, "Well, that tall handyman seems to be fixing things in your..." I was informed that my apartment was in a state of disrepair. I was encouraged to consult with my wife, who seemed to possess a knowledge beyond what she had explicitly conveyed. Although Sally was known to be inquisitive, she was also privy to a great deal of information regarding the happenings within our building. Her remark could have been a veiled caution for me to be mindful of the situation. For several months, I had reservations about my wife's fidelity. Her actions, particularly the abrupt termination of phone calls and the presence of a cologne-like scent on her clothing, gave rise to these concerns. I once confronted her about these suspicions and she provided reassurances. I was the only one for her, exhibiting no indications of deceit. I accepted her assertion and attempted to assuage my suspicions. In retrospect, I should have pursued the matter further, but my unwavering trust in her prevented me from doing so. Some might view this as a lack of discernment on my part, but I believe my affection and confidence in Rose blinded me to potential issues. I also suspect that part of me was reluctant to confront her, as I sought to avoid any discord. This dynamic persisted until one day, when I experienced a sudden change in health. I left work early, foregoing even my usual lunch break. Upon entering the apartment in question is a studio unit, which is situated at the rear of the residence. This configuration makes it impossible to hear if someone knocks at the front door or enters the house. As I proceeded towards the bedroom, I heard sounds. Rose was clearly in a state of sexual pleasure, accompanied by a male voice offering her compliments. At this point, I realized that the situation was serious, but the full extent of the situation only became clear to me when I understood the context. The identity of the man was unclear, but it was evident that Rose was with someone. It was implausible that your husband was unaware of your actions. If I were in your position, I would keep you under lock and key when I am away. The male voice boasted about Rose's prowess and joked about her skills. The man identified as Tommy egged Rose on, dismissing the possibility of your arrival. Rose pleaded with him to hurry, fearing that I might return for lunch. There was no reason to worry, Tommy dismissed, claiming he could effortlessly respond to my assertion that he could easily handle me calling him a pushover. Rose attempted to defend me, insisting that despite my gentle nature, I was genuinely a decent person. However, her voice conveyed little conviction. The realization that the most important woman in your life perceives you as feeble is indescribably devastating. I don't even remember making the decision to do it. I had not yet made a decision to do so, but just before I reached the bedroom door, I instinctively activated my tiny video and sound recorder. This device, no larger than a lighter, could easily be concealed in a shirt pocket. It had initially been used for work purposes. My boss, Bill, had been claiming my work as his own and undermining me in meetings to elevate his own status. This was at the suggestion of close friends. I started recording. Our interactions were documented to prove his wrongdoing. He regularly disparaged me, likely thinking I was too meek to retaliate while the recorder was on. Tommy made threats against me. I recognized that voice unleashing a wave of old memories. It could not be him, I thought to myself. I had had enough. I approached the open bedroom door, confronting the sight of Tommy Bollinger, the antagonist from my high school days. The memory of my wife's infidelity and my subsequent feelings of betrayal and hatred towards her were indelibly etched into my mind. I was rendered immobile and paralyzed by the sheer intensity of my emotions, which turned from love to loathing and hatred for my wife in an instant. As he continued his actions, I stood there, frozen in time, suddenly snapped back to reality. Overcome with emotion, I confronted Rose. "What do you think you're doing? Get out of my apartment," I shouted at them with a level of anger I'd never heard in my own voice before. The look on my face probably conveyed my fury more effectively than any words could. I felt angrier than I had ever been. Rose, for her part, wore a dismissive expression, as if to say, "So what? What are you going to do about it? You never act," she seemed to challenge, underestimating my resolve. My wife only showed a flicker of shock before settling into a defiant stare. Tommy, for his part, just stared back at me, starting to laugh dismissively. "You're kidding. You're married, PC Pete. Wow, now I see why you were never worried." He laughed at me. Rose turned to Tommy with confusion, seeking clarity on the insulting nickname he used for me. "Rose, your husband attended the same high school as I did. He experienced a case of incontinence, which was the first occasion on which we encountered each other. He did not share this story with you, but he did use it as a means of embarrassing me in front of my wife. This appeared to be effective, as my wife regarded me as if I were barely a man. His strategy succeeded. I used to give him a hard time every week. He was unable to tolerate even a modicum of adversity following the conclusion of his intimate encounter with my wife. He attempted to assert his manhood, but until that occurred, he was instructed to wait outside. My wife's gaze shifted between us in silence, and I was left with the distinct impression that our relationship was over. For your information, PC Pete, I am currently employed, and your rental payments are being processed. My wages, therefore, in a perverse manner, you are indirectly contributing to this situation. How does that make you feel?" Tommy taunted, revving in the cruelty of his words. He then proceeded to resume his intimate relationship with my wife, who simply averted her gaze. I informed him, in a calm but assertive manner, that he should leave my apartment. I was bracing myself for any potential retaliation from Tommy, as I was seething with anger and trembling with rage. It seemed as though PCP had finally taken hold of him. He asserted, "I will address this issue." He continued, "You had the opportunity to disengage, but now you will face the consequences." Tommy advanced toward me at the doorway. He declared, "It is peculiar how an encounter with an individual from one's academic past can lead to the assumption that they have not undergone changes." However, Tommy miscalculated my resolve. After completing secondary education, a professor at my university suggested I began training in martial arts to enhance my confidence. I found the training enjoyable and began training in judo, kickboxing, and various karate disciplines. I committed to training at the kickboxing club twice a week and exercised at the gym at least once a week. This has been my routine for the last 6 years. My wife, Rose, never accompanied me, likely assuming I was using a stair-stepper or similar equipment at the gym. At the gym, I engaged in sparring sessions twice a week. Initially, I found it challenging to participate in sparring sessions with individuals who appeared to be intimidated by my presence. I was reminded of my brother's fearful expression when I nearly hit him with a thrown object years ago. My instructors likened this experience to learning how to read without ever opening a book, a comparison that resonated with me. Over time, I began to participate in sparring sessions and developed a reasonable level of proficiency. I restrained my power, never intending to cause harm. My swiftness was identified as my primary strength. All the accumulated anger and frustration suddenly manifested when Tommy advanced towards me. His movements appeared lethargic for his size. I evaded his attack by moving to the right. At that moment, I initiated my counterattack. I heard a cracking sound and I felt no remorse. I was only beginning. Tommy was in pain. He attempted to use his other arm and body to attack me, but I simply sidestepped, causing him to fall into the door frame. I then stood by his head and proceeded to neutralize him. Meanwhile, my wife was screaming from the bed, covered up with only her head visible. I ignored her and focused on handling the situation. My actions might seem harsh, but Tommy never showed mercy or restraint to anyone. He was a total A. I felt no pity for him as I dealt with him as the enemy he was. Rose watched me with a combination of fear and astonishment throughout our time together. I had never once shown aggression, even when other men flirted with her. At times, I wondered if she did that deliberately to test my reaction, thinking of me as weak. However, the look on her face now made it clear that she no longer held that belief. She witnessed me. I was fully aware of her intentions as she provocatively engaged with other men in my presence while taking down a guy who had been spreading lies about me. I did not intervene at the downtown bar because I thought that was what she wanted, but if you have ever questioned whether I was as tough or strong as those other guys, they might be physically bigger, but they are just as beatable as you are. My former romantic partner and Rose are now aware of this fact. A true man is able to discern when it is appropriate to disengage from a conflict, confident in the potential outcome. My temper nearly resulted in a calamitous incident with my younger brother, Billy. This experience taught me the importance of controlling my emotions. It is this quality that defines a genuine man, not the disgraceful behavior displayed by the individual now lying on the ground. You have made a fundamental error, Rose, in assuming that my gentleness is indicative of weakness. I informed my wife that I had always demonstrated love and respect for her, but that this was no longer the case. I then requested that she leave the premises immediately, as I was unable to continue cohabiting with her. I informed her that I would not be held responsible for her actions or any consequences that might arise as a result of her return. My words were driven by a profound sense of anger towards her, and her mere presence and silence conveyed her indifference to my feelings. I then departed. Our apartment complex decided that we should cease all contact with her. I returned to work, which felt more like home than my actual apartment did. About 30 minutes later, the police arrived and escorted me downtown. News had rapidly circulated about how I had defeated a much larger man, sending him to the hospital. The altercation with Tommy did not even leave me with a scratch or feel like a real workout as the police were handcuffing me. I informed my superior, Bill, that he would be next. I accused him of being a traitor and stated that I would return with the same intense anger I had harbored towards Rose. He appeared frightened after learning of the rumors about the aggressive individual who I had fought. I spent the remainder of the day at the police station. When I returned to work, I decided to confront my superior, believing I had nothing left to lose. However, I learned that he had resigned and would not be returning. I was then summoned to a meeting with the company president, Peter. Your work, but you can't be getting into fights and intimidating my staff. He informed me that I had shared the details of the incident in my apartment and my boss's actions, mentioning that I had video evidence of him stealing my ideas and designs. He did not elaborate further, but gave me a knowing smile. Peter, I have always sensed that you had a strong character hidden behind that calm demeanor. He said, Bill was a problem and his departure was inevitable. He continued, you have actually done us a service and you are unique in developing 3 distinct proposals for budget. He was aware of the costs and labor estimates associated with the work, and it was evident that Bill was attempting to claim your achievements as his own. He provided me with his contact information, indicating that he is an excellent lawyer who can assist with both the offense charges and your divorce. Once everything is settled and assuming you are not incarcerated, your position here will remain unchanged. It is advisable to maintain a safe distance from this location until the legal proceedings have concluded. Peter, could you confirm whether you were involved in the altercation with the larger individual? Was there any connection between this incident and your wife? I replied, laughing, that the encounter had been brief and relatively uneventful. Well, I wish you luck, Peter, and I look forward to hearing from you, he finally said, offering me a handshake before I. Upon returning to my apartment, I discovered it to be unoccupied. Carrie had removed her belongings, and while I was not concerned about what she took, I was troubled by the fact that she had left behind my small pocket recorder, which was still running. This brings me to my current situation in a courtroom, awaiting the decision of a jury of 12 as to whether I will be incarcerated for the next 6 to 10 years during my lunch hours. Over the course of several years, I anticipated a range of potential outcomes, including an acquittal, given the extent to which Tommy had affected me. I faced a series of charges framed in complex legal jargon. In essence, the prosecution argued that I initiated the fight, but the detailed account of Tommy's injuries, as presented in court, was distressing. Tommy sustained significant injuries, and I will not enumerate them all here. However, I will note that he lost several teeth, both upper and lower, and one testicle. In addition to the loss of teeth in both the upper and lower jaws, one testicle is also absent. Each time Tommy appeared in court, he was transported in a wheelchair, wrapped in bandages. Despite recognizing the appropriateness of remorse, it was challenging to muster sympathy for him in court. I maintained a composed and serious demeanor, yet the jury seemed to struggle with the image of me, a 57-year-old design architect weighing 185 pounds, severely injuring a much larger 63-year-old man. Once the proceedings had commenced and the jury had taken their seats, I awaited the announcement of the verdict. The jury foreman stood up as the court was called to order, and, when the judge inquired as to whether the jury had reached a verdict, the foreman confirmed that I had been found not guilty on all charges. This announcement caused a stir in the courtroom, and, in response, the foreman winked at me, which took me a moment to fully grasp. The president of the company then turned around. He proceeded to congratulate me and suggested I take the remainder of the week off, indicating his expectation of my return to work on Monday. I thanked him, receiving congratulations and hugs from friends and others. Leo was also present, cheering me on and even making a rude gesture towards Tommy, who had a memorable look on his face as I left the courtroom with my lawyer. I was compelled to respond in kind, making a rude gesture towards Tommy, which he appeared to find amusing. Despite his current incapacity, his glare was empty and his threats were clear. I could not help but smile, feeling liberated and completely vindicated, as I made my way out of the hallway. I spotted the jury foreman waiting for me and signaled for me to come over for a chat. "Hello, Mr. Huckabee. I'm Harry Peterson. It is a relief to hear that you were cleared of all charges. The jury unanimously felt that you acted in self-defense. From my perspective, there was no reason for concern. That is why I accepted the role of foreman to ensure your freedom." The video evidence of the incident was the decisive factor. He shared his thoughts quietly, appearing confused. I questioned his motives, to which he responded with a smile, offering his hand for a shake. "Mr. Huckabee, I attended the same high school as you a year before you. I remember. How Tommy treated people, myself included, was deplorable. He picked on me until my mother transferred me to another school. He turned my life into a living nightmare, causing trauma to many others. He did not even recognize me. I saw what he did to you as well. In the end, he got what was coming to him. I wish you the best of luck going forward, Peter. Just remember that not everyone is a. It is evident that the aggressor is permitted to emerge triumphant. One need only consider the case of Tommy, who shared his views with a smile before departing. My wife attempted to engage him in conversation, but I advised against it, suggesting that she move on because I intended to do so as well. I love you, Rose, but I am unable to revert to our previous circumstances. The pain associated with this transition is beyond my capacity to articulate. He then proceeded to leave the premises, leaving her stranded in the hallway. The video footage captured Tommy verbally abusing me and refusing to depart while my wife maintained a stoic silence. The jury interpreted her silence as tacit approval of my account. Tommy was instructed to leave once more, but Rose did not react. He then proceeded to physically assault me. The video footage provides a clear visual record of the altercation. At this juncture, I pushed him into the door frame. Subsequently, the recorder ended up face down next to the dresser. Upon reviewing the playback and audio from when the police arrived, it became evident that my wife had claimed I instigated the altercation. She could be heard rehearsing her response to the question of whether I had instigated the altercation. The conversation she planned with me was a fabrication of her version of events. It seemed she felt no remorse for her infidelity. Of note is that Tommy inadvertently confessed on the recording that he was engaged in personal activities on company time. This means that his employer's insurance would not cover his injuries. The last I heard, he ended up in a due to his erratic behavior, Tommy was compelled to seek treatment at a distant rehabilitation facility. His family was responsible for bearing the financial burden of his medical expenses. Upon my return to work the following Monday, I discovered that my office had been cleared and my belongings had been relocated to Bill's former office. I had assumed the role previously held by Bill. I was effectively becoming my own boss, which felt incredibly rewarding. Additionally, I suddenly found myself gaining attention from the women at work within my first week in the new role. 4 of them approached me to ask me out on dates. It is notable that these were the same women who had approached me previously. I later discovered that the company president had been disseminating information that I was a former Special Forces operative who occasionally worked as a government spy when not occupied with design projects. My colleagues, particularly the women, were enthusiastic about the rumor, which led to me being regarded as an enigmatic figure. This was a significant change in my circumstances. Following the dissolution of my marriage to Rose, I have initiated romantic relationships with several women at my workplace in addition to other individuals outside the office. While I do miss her, I find it challenging to consider reconnecting with her given my current circumstances. I am grateful for the support and interest expressed by those who have reached out to me or considered sharing their experiences or those of others with me. I wish everyone well,